you really look for it to understand the element of chassidus. So the part of Torah that the Rebbe chooses is the idea of Maida Ani. And the Rebbe says, what's the idea of Maida Ani? Very simple. According to Pshat, the idea of Maida Ani is that we thank Hashem for giving us back our neshama. Okay, that's very, very simple. I'll jump through Pshat, the Rebbe's side, and then we'll go back to each one on its own. The remez in Maida Ani is brought down is the idea of Tchias HaMesim, that the same way that we wake up from a sleep, which is like death every day, so too we have a remez that there's going to be the idea of Tchias HaMesim in the future. Maida Ani goes a step further, and the idea of drush. Drush, we know, is a little bit of a different part of Torah. It's not necessarily so connected like remez, but we learn something from there as well. By Maida Ani, what's happening is that Hashem is giving us back our neshama. So it's brought down an interesting halacha. If someone owes you money, let's say he stole something from you. Person steals $1,000 from you. Okay. I'm going to add something. It doesn't say this inside, but let's say he takes that $1,000 and he buys a bicycle. Okay. And then he goes out of town and he wants you to watch that bicycle for him. So most of us would say to ourselves, hey, this is a golden opportunity. I have the bicycle in my rishus. I'm not going to be able to get my money back otherwise. Let me hold on to this bicycle. So Allah says, no, you're not allowed to do that, because he gave it to you with goodwill to watch it for him. If you want to get your $1,000 back, you have to take it to court. So same thing with our neshama. We gave our neshama to Hashem to watch for us when we go to sleep, even though we have, unfortunately, like it doesn't speak for myself, we have a debt to Hashem. We don't always do exactly what we need to do. Hashem doesn't hold on to our neshama to so to speak, pay back that debt. Rather, he gives it back to us. And then the side element of Maida Ani we say in Maida Nifnecha Melech Chai V'Kayim. So to explain in Kabbalah that Melech is the idea of Malchus and Chai V'Kayim is the idea of Yisod. So the neshama comes, in fact, from the idea of Malchus, the way it's connected to Yisod. Don't worry, the Maimer does not explain deeply what Malchus and Yisod are doing over here, and I won't get into that either. But then the Rebbe says that Chassidus, in fact, adds a certain element to each and every one of these explanations. The Pshat, the Rebbe's Jewish side of Maida Ani. And what Chassidus adds is the same thing to each one, and each one basically reaches a new level through that same injection of Chassidus into it. So what Chassidus adds, essentially, is the idea of Yechida. Even in Kabbalah, we have the idea of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya. The four parts of the Neshama, which are Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, are inside our body, Chaya is outside our body, but still connected to our body. Yechida is an element of the Neshama which is completely higher and outside the body. The idea of Chassidus is adding the idea of Yechida. So in Maida Ani, when we say to Hashem, thank you for giving us back our Neshama, Chassidus adds that in Maida Ani we know it doesn't say Hashem's name. Why? Because nothing could make Tameh the idea of, and that's why we're able to say Maida Ani right when we wake up, even before washing our hands, even though our hands are essentially Tameh. So why are we able to say it then? Because nothing can make Tameh the Maida Ani of a Yid. Famous thing, I believe, brought down even in Hayom Yom. So that's Chassidus' pshat on Maida Ani. Now let's go back to pshat. Let's go back to the simple pshat of Maida Ani, that we thank Hashem for giving us back our neshama. What Chassidus adds over there is that we're thanking Hashem for giving us back our neshama. We mean the neshama of a yid. The Rebbe brings down a famous story with Rabbi Yigdiel that he was given a bracha to have long life, and he told the Rebbe, I believe it's Tzemach Tzedek, yes, thank you for the bracha for long life, but they shouldn't be peasant years. A famous question. Someone gives you something, you don't start making conditions. You know, thank you for the golden watch, but I also wanted to have a golden band or whatever. You take the present and you say thank you. So what Chassidus shows us is that if the years were not years that were full of Torah, if the years were peasant years, in other words, just being alive, then it wouldn't even be considered a gift. So what Chassidus shows us is that when we say thank you to Hashem for giving us back our neshama, we're saying thank you to Hashem for giving us back a Jewish neshama. In other words, that the entire point of living is this Jewish neshama. This only come from Chassidus. Because the parts of the nefesh, ruach, and neshama, at the end of the day, we live in this world. So just a long life, even if it was just a life not full of Torah mitzvahs, would still be a positive thing. Chassidus comes and shows us that Yechida is everything. The only thing that's important is our connection to Hashem, and therefore Maida Ani L'Fanecha is only a real thank you if we get back our neshama, in other words, the neshama of the Yid. The next part, the next definition of Maida Ani is the idea of remez. Remez, we said, is miramis on the idea of Tchias HaMesim. Now the Rebbe says that Tchias HaMesim is a very far away thing from waking up in the morning. Right? Tchias HaMesim is all the millions or billions of neshamas that are people that have been over the past 3,000 years are all going to come back. How are you even comparing that to the fact that you woke up? Yeah, waking up is Echad, Yishishim, Miss at the 60th, but how are you comparing it to the idea of waking up? How is the Maram of Tchias HaMesim? Again, Chassidus comes and explains it very simply. We know that Chassidus explains that the world and every single person is recreated every second. Now, if we were recreated every second, in that second when we go from being asleep, which when we know when we're asleep, all of our faculties are hidden. You can't even see the difference between a king and a peasant when they're both sleeping. Now, you don't see anything on them. In that moment when we wake up, in fact, we are being recreated. So not only is our neshama going back into our body, but rather our body is considered to be a completely new body, being recreated. Even our neshama, to a certain extent, is considered to be a new neshama. So that is something which I can go ahead and compare to Tchias HaMesim. Tchias HaMesim is bringing back something which is gone, right? Millions of people which have been dead for thousands of years, and bringing them back with Tchias HaMesim, you can compare that to the idea of Maida Ani, because the entire world is being recreated every second. Again, this is something which you can only see from the perspective of Yechida, because Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, I live in this world, I go to sleep every night, I wake up every morning, I feel very much that, I'm alive today as a continuation from yesterday. I don't necessarily feel that I'm brand new, Chadash Mukar, like a new person, but Yechida's perspective, when we're connected to Hashem, we say, wait a second, like we learned in Shaykh and Amunah, that the world, in fact, needs to be recreated every second because it doesn't have any of its own mitzias. So, from the perspective of Yechida, we can see, yes, Maida Ani, the fact that we woke up, is a remes for Tchias HaMesim. It's something new. So again, I just want to point out that what's happening with what the Rebbe is doing over here is explaining to us what Chassidus is, showing us how Chassidus injects the same Chiddush into all elements of Torah. We're just going to speak about 4, but all elements of Torah. And through injecting that same element, it's able to erase all the other 4 levels of Torah, that we can look at them from the perspective of Yechida. And so let's move along to the idea of drush. Drush, we explained again in very short, was the idea that it says in halacha that even if someone owes you money, if he gave you something to watch, you're not allowed to grab that thing to pay back your loan. You have to give him back what he asked you to watch, and then if you want to take him to court, you can take him to court, you can take him to basement. We learned that's an idea of Maida Ani again because we give our neshama to Hashem to watch, and even though we have a debt perhaps to Hashem does not hold on to it. However, if you think about it, the Rebbe says this halacha doesn't really make sense. You would think, because what's the point? Why are we going in circles? Why can't we do like a shibud der Nasan over here? I owe you, you owe me. I already have the bicycle. I already have the thing. So I'm going to hold it. Why would I go in circles? Especially if probably why did I not take this guy to court? And probably why did he give it to me to watch? Because I'm weaker than this guy, and I don't think I'm going to get my money back from him. So the only way I can imagine getting my money back is to hold on to this thing right now. So isn't it the correct thing to get my money back by holding on to this object? Comes to this and explains that, and this is what I was pointing out before a little bit, is that, like I said when I started, that all of us have learned, many Maimarim perhaps, or many different parts of Chassidus, and it would seem that, they're all, different parts of it. Different, especially the Rebbe's Maimarim. You learn a Maimar on Shavuot, you learn a Maimar on Pesach, So there seems to be a bunch of maybe disparate explanations. In fact, on Pesach and Shavuos, we have many around we speak about this very concept about like Eidus, Chukim, and Mishpatim. Especially on Pesach, we have this idea that according to Chassidus, we see how really we do all the mitzvahs because they are the ratzon of Hashem. Right? And the fact that Hashem wants different mitzvahs to have mishpatim, to have reasons, is also because of the ratzon of Hashem. So the Rebbe says this idea we see in the idea of not holding the object as well. Even though logically you might think it makes sense to hold on to the object, when you look at it from the perspective of Yechida, there's no obvious. There's only what Hashem wants. There is only Hashem's ratzon. If Hashem's ratzon is that if someone owes you money, then you go to Basin to work it out, you don't take matters into your own hand and you hold on to their object, so there's no logic anymore. There's no using your own seichel to say, hey, I'm not going to get my money back. Rather, Hashem's ratzon is that you give him back his object and take him to Basin afterward. That is automatically what's going to happen. Again, this is something which is only possible from the perspective of Yechida. So we went to Pshat, Remez, and Drush. From the perspective of Soid, again, the Rebbe does not get into it very, very deeply, maybe because, again, we're trying to really give a clear picture of the essence of Chassidus and not to get too lost in the details. But again, the Pshat which we learn according to Soid, according to Kabbalah, from the idea of Maida'ani, is Melech Chai V'Kaim. And the Neshama comes from the way that Malchus is connected to the level of Soid. The Rebbe explains that Chassidus adds to this that when could you really have a connection between Malchus and Yesod is when you have the idea of Yechida. Like we know the famous thing that compared to Atzmos, the highest levels and the lowest levels are all one. So from the perspective of Yechida, you can have Malchus and Yesod in the same level. When you have a Yichud, when you have Achdus between Malchus and Yesod, then you can have a Neshama drawn down into this world. So the Rebbe, like I said, does not get too much into this level of Kabbalah, but the Rebbe does add a very interesting thing, especially in the Aura over there, where the Rebbe says that you might think, or maybe, I don't remember the Lashon of the Rebbe, but especially growing up, it might seem that Chassidus is a Pirush on Kabbalah, right? Especially a lot of my mind, they bring down different Yanim in Kabbalah, and then according to Chassidus, we understand them better. But the Rebbe says no. Chassidus might help you understand Kabbalah better, but the same way Chassidus might help you understand Pshat better. Because Chassidus will show you the essence of what Pshat is. Chassidus will explain to you the essence of what Kabbalah is. So if you read in Kabbalah these levels of Malchus and Yesod, you might not fully understand these concepts. Chassidus will help them bring it more down to earth, which is something which you see definitely we see that a lot in Chassidus, where the Rebbe in a Maimer will never just leave you with saying the level of Malchus, right? The Rebbe will bring it down practically, in mitzvahs in our day-to-day lives or something like this. Anyway, just to end off, and really with this ending off, the Rebbe explains this entire concept of how we see Chassidus in our day-to-day lives. The Rebbe gives a very interesting thing from Halacha. That in Halacha we have the idea of Dal Damas Kainis, right? If you're walking in the Shusarabim, or in a simta, and like the side of Shusarabim, and someone lost an object and he was Meyayish, whoever is within 4 amas of that object, it becomes yours. And in Halakha it explains why, because the 4 amas around you are considered your chatzah, they're considered your property. Now what's interesting is that that's not entirely true, because a chatzah, something in your property, if it's not mishtameres, if that chatzah is not watched, then even if someone leaves something in your chatzar, that the item does not belong to you unless you say, hey, my chatzar is kind of this for me right now. If it's a chatzar proper that's mishtameres, that it's watched, then even if someone drops something, even if you don't know about it, it becomes yours. When you're walking, even if you're looking straight and the item's on the side, by you being within 4 amas, that object becomes yours. So it's a big question. If the whole idea of the 4 amas we learned from the idea of chatzar, then how could your 4 amas be stronger than chatzar? Chatzar, even though you're not paying attention to it, and it's not mishtameres, it does not become yours, it's by regular chatzar, yet by Dal Amas it does become yours. So Rebbe explains that the idea of Dal Amas is basically your essence spreading out into the 4 amas. And the Rebbe uses to explain that when Chassidus spreads into other things, that's when you actually see the essence of it. Maybe this is something I'm just adding. Just when I was learning it, I thought of a physical Moshe explains. maybe you see this from oil as well. Oil on its own, you might not see all the uses for it. When oil goes out, all of a sudden you see that it has a use. You can use it for cooking, you can light with it, you can use it to open the rusty lock. It has many different uses. You only see those uses when it goes out and it's involved in the world. So the Rebbe says, this is where we learn the idea of Yefutza and Sefachutza, which is in the beginning of the Sikha. The Rebbe says that we know that the reward for Chassidus going into the world is Mashiach, right? When is Mashiach going to come? So, by looking at what Mashiach is, we'll be able to understand what Chassidus is. So from this idea, when we see that when Chassidus goes out, when Chassidus, and especially we see this in the Rebbe's Maimar, like I gave an example of the Maimar, of a Maimar which speaks about Eizchok and Mishpatim. The Rebbe seems to be giving a simple question and answer. Why are there Eizchok and Mishpatim, and why are they in that order? And the Rebbe says that all mitzvahs are really Ratzon of Hashem. But what we see from what we just discussed now is that Chassidus definitely is not just one answer or one question. Rather, Chassidus permeates everything. For example, this one idea of all mitzvahs being Ratzon of Hashem help us understand many things, all the way to something as simple as Maida Ani. That in Maida Ani, why do we learn the idea of giving back someone's item, even though it doesn't make sense, because it's not supposed to make sense. The idea of mitzvahs is not what makes sense, rather essentially something which is Hashem's Ratzon. And through this, the Rebbe says, we see that the idea of Yefutza and Chutza, that the idea of Chutza is what's important over here. That when Chassidus goes out and permeates everything, and when we learn Chassidus, that's why I said, even though learning Neshul Teres Chassidus, I finally did it now, and it doesn't mean that all of a sudden I understand all the Chassidus much better. But what I do see is that every element of Chassidus is not one unique point. Rather, it's something which is connected to this bigger concept, this idea of Yechida, which is basically looking at everything from, I could almost say, I guess, from Hashem's perspective. And the Rebbe says, through this, we get the idea of Mashiach, because that is what Mashiach is. Mashiach is, Yefutza Mashiach Chutza, we're going to have Gilei Likus in the world itself.
You should have spoken first. The most complicated thing was yours.
Schlecht Schmoel. No, it's just that. No, das ist das wir machen doch alle andere Künstler. Mach nicht die Jungen. Ja. Have to practice.